Hello, everybody. We're going to wait just a few more minutes here to let people join. Thank you for your patience, and we will get started momentarily. Hello, hello. Welcome to our webcast, Shaping the Future of Software Capitalization with Automation. We're happy that you joined us today, wherever you're calling in from. My name is Parker Ennis, and I'm the director here at Allstacks of Product Marketing. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about software capitalization and what led us to where we are today, the challenges that some organizations may be facing today, and then we're going to show you how Allstacks is positioned to help you with some of this. So we have a couple wonderful guests with us here today that I would also like to introduce themselves here, and then we'll get right into the content for you. We have Scott Buxton and Mark Mulholland here with us. Scott, want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Parker. Scott Buxton. Full disclosure, I invested in Allstacks a couple of years ago because I realized that the company was building and selling software that met very personal use cases and pain points that I've experienced in my career. Prior to that, I was at Datadog for over 5 years in New York City as the VP of Finance. Prior to Datadog, I was at GitHub as the VP of Finance for 3 years, and then I started the first 10 years of my career at Deloitte in San Francisco. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. And then we also have Mark Mulholland with us. Mark, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. As Parker said, my name is Mark Mulholland. I'm a product manager here at Allstacks, going on 3 years. It's been a while. And one of the features that I've been focused on while I was here has been R&D cap reporting. So this is something near and dear to my heart. Really excited to talk with you all about it, and even more excited to hear your feedback. So thanks.
Awesome. All right. And so you'll see here kind of the things we're going to cover on the left of your screen. We're going to give a little bit of market context, go into some of the challenges, like I mentioned before, and then how we can help you solve the problem with some automation. And then we will give you a quick little demo of the product itself, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So please do let us know where you're from in the chat. Feel free to engage and ask questions. We will, of course, try to address as many as we can at the end, but please do use the comment function to engage and interact with us. We really appreciate it. All righty. So before we get into software capitalization itself, we know some of y'all may not be familiar with Allstacks. So I'm going to give you a quick little intro here of who we are and what we do. But before I talk about the platform itself, I want to go over kind of 4 things that we hear often from our customers and prospects and those that we engage with. And these are 4 things and use cases that are very, very important and critical in today's world. And one thing I always like to say is we turn the lights on with your engineering data. So you see that first. We really care about aligning business outcomes to engineering outcomes and engineering work. And so things like Are our teams focused on the right work and key milestones? Do we have the right capacity to deliver? Making sure that your engineering organization and the output aligns with your business strategy and your goals. We also hear a lot about risk and forecasting delivery. So are you working on the right things, but can you know when they are expected to be completed? Does your target date maybe differ from your delivery date? So understanding that you get complete visibility into what's being worked on, then how you can improve. And that, of course, comes to the third one, which is being able to benchmark and understand where your team is and how effective they are. And of course, the fourth one, what we want to talk about today here today, is the ability to automate some of the painful parts of the software capitalization process. So we're going to get into that today, and that will be our focal point. And I want to call out that a lot of human hours get put into the actual maintaining, the timekeeping, and the tracking of where developers and engineers' efforts are going. And that's where we're going to focus on today in that part of the process, being able to automate how that time or how those timesheets are maintained and where that data comes from. So that data gathering process and report generation is where a lot of that pain is felt. So we'll be talking about that here today. And then a quick overview of our platform in general, since we're very much so well known for our value stream management platform or software engineering intelligence platform. And the bottom line is building software is hard. And it's tough to plan and adjust and understand how to be most reliable and consistent with your delivery. So the Allstacks platform ingests engineering data from your common tools, Git-based SCM, GitLab, GitHub, and then popular build tools like Jenkins or Circle CI. And of course, your portfolio management tools like Jira and Azure DevOps, ADO. And we turn that engineering data into meaningful metrics and insights throughout the SDLC. And so we want that to elicit action, right? We want data to have meaning and help you take action, ask the right questions, and improve how you deliver your software. So we find that engineering organizations, and especially their leaders, are using the kind of insights that our platform provides to gain complete visibility into what's working, their deliverables, forecast work completion dates, which we find to be more and more important as we go into a world where we've got to go faster, and release more predictably, right? Predictability breeds consistency. And of course, with that, we want to be able to measure and improve our overall team performance. And really, I think this is most important because this gives engineering organizations and leaders the option to drive healthy change across your organization. Cultural change is hard. And Allstacks can help with that. So a quick little overview of our platform so you know who we are and what we do and why we're very well suited to help with this particular use case that we're going to talk about here today. Thanks for letting me give you a little preview there, and we'll get right into the meat and why you joined us here today. And we'll set the stage a little bit with some context around software capitalization. And for this, we're going to have our friend Scott Buxton here come on and give you a little bit of the lay of the land from his perspective. Scott, go ahead and take it away, my friend.
Great. Thank you again, Parker. So what's everybody doing here, right? We're talking about R&D capitalization. And I know, based on a lot of our attendees, many of you have experienced the same pain points regarding this topic as I have, whether I was in my career at Deloitte, GitHub, Datadog, or even today, currently. And so what is software capitalization, right? It can cover a couple different things. It can basically be around the R&D tax credits that have changed, and we'll go into that in a little bit under Section 174 here. Or it can be that you are a software company adhering to US GAAP, and because you are adhering to US GAAP and have internally developed software costs, you are forced to capitalize those costs. So you've got this use case, and there'll be a slide on this, and I'll go into a personal example on this. We've got this use case under one set of standards, US GAAP, and you got this use case under a completely different set of standards, the tax code, that is way different than US GAAP. So, how are these costs actually, factored and capitalized, right? And so to take a step back, what I mean by capitalizing is under the US GAAP case, you're just putting it on your balance sheet and you're amortizing it, and you're depreciating. Another word for depreciation over a useful life of what you think that asset should be, basically used for. So that's the US GAAP side. The R&D tax side, again, prior to Section 174 would be when companies realize they've got a lot of R&D work, they can actually on their federal and in some cases state returns claim this credit that can be offset against income. And so on this next slide here, it goes into kind of each of these, two use cases. There's actually more than that because there are countries like France that offer an R&D tax credit. So you could be a software company headquartered here in the US, but with developers out in France and utilize their country's regulations to get your tax credit. So kind of tried to summarize it here again with the first column here being the tax credit, right? Again, following the Internal Revenue Code. Hopefully nobody is at a company that's been audited, but they'll be audited by IRS auditors, right? Which is different than the third last column. And you got the US GAAP case, right? Where I mentioned you are being forced to do this by adhering to US GAAP. You might be getting a financial statement audit because your company's public, or maybe you have intentions to go public, or maybe you have a board that requires you to get a financial statement audit. And so therefore you have to adhere to US GAAP and capitalize your R&D costs. And those costs then get audited by financial statement auditors. So try to summarize this here and more importantly, try to just make it clear that Allstacks can help with both of these use cases, right? And I mentioned there's other use cases than just these two, but these two are just the main ones here. And, I encourage everybody to kind of have questions. As Parker mentioned at the beginning, we want to try to make this as interactive as possible. And we would love to hear about your own personal use cases and pain points and whatnot in the Q&A section of this webcast. But with that being said, I will pass it over to Mark. Oh, I'm sorry. I've got this next slide. Thank you, Parker. So kind of just summarize what I just mentioned here. And there's some technical accounting standards that are referenced on this slide. ASC 350, ASC 985. I'm not going to tell you all what that stands for, but that's basically just the US GAAP side of it, right? And then mentioned you got the R&D side of it for tax purposes, but then also you actually have to account for this with any third party software that you buy and need to put on your balance sheet and appreciate again over the same useful life, no different than the stuff you are building for your own product. So just wanted to lay this out here that again, this is kind of the ecosystem here of what is capitalizable from a software cost perspective. And again, it's really that previous slide where we're really trying to drive home that are the use cases that Allstacks really assists with. So apologies again. Now I will pass it over to Mark.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott.
Appreciate it, Scott. And as we were thinking about capturing this R&D information and accounting for this expenditure, we thought about it in a couple different ways and saw that there was benefits not only to the financial team that we'll be talking about today, GAAP, tax credits, but also to the engineering team as well. Being able to explain what your team is working on allows you to justify the work you're doing, show the value to the company, justify headcount, identify opportunities to change and improve your workflow so that you can deliver as much value as possible to your team and really cut new ground so that you have more products to sell, so that you have new features to market, those types of things. And so I see it as a product manager as an opportunity to have a piece of information that you can wield in this financial realm, as well as this engineering sensibility to get a sense of how your team is working. And in that way, it works in with Allstacks' overall offering, as well as extending into this financial group.
Yeah.
And with that, I will pass it back to you, Scott, I think, so that you can talk about the real world pain that, thankfully you don't feel as much, but you did in passing your experience.
Yeah, it'll be just coming up here. Scott will be right after me. Just going to do a quick little introduction of some of the challenges and the pains, right, that Scott will elaborate on and give a little bit of personal experience. I find it actually very, very fascinating to hear. And we want to focus here on where the humans are putting in a lot of effort upstream, right? So software capitalization is notorious for being a little bit cumbersome, right? So there is a human involved in manually tracking, reporting, and maintaining where developers are spending their time and attributing that to different things. So usually involves some spreadsheets, some timesheets, maybe even potentially interviews that are going to be taking up time, a combination of these things all at once. But but it's not, as straightforward as it may seem. It is very critical. It's a business critical thing, but we want it to be as simple as possible. And so, we hear software factory comparisons all of the time. And so there are a lot of moving parts throughout this process, but a lot of the human hours that get spent are in this data gathering, understanding how are things labeled in Jira. Where is this person spending their time? Is this epic, this issue, or this body of work something that's capitalizable? And manually figuring that out. And that can take tens, hundreds, maybe thousands of hours, depending on the size of your organization. So trying to reduce and eliminate where those human hours are spent will pay dividends in the long run, make you feel much more prepared for what comes next in the use case. So kind of highlight the three big things that we've noticed and we've heard from our customers and people in the market is, we're human, we're not perfect. And so spreadsheets and looking at rows and rows and rows, we're prone to human error. So it can be tough when you're doing that manually. It can be time consuming when we're spending that much time and, that's consuming our cycles. That could be spent on other work, on planned initiative, et cetera. And then, of course, there's the management burden and the overhead. Senior engineering leaders are often who we find, or a counterpart that is equivalent that is doing this work, right? And so that eats up a lot of their cycles as well, and can take away from them being people managers. So just a few things that we want to highlight that we know from what we hear are pains and things that we can help with. And Scott will be able to go into a little bit here of his experiences. So we're really, really thankful that he's on with us to share some of this and give a little bit of his personal take on the challenges, what may have surprised you, and kind of how you overcame those and what your perspective is.
Yeah, thank you, Parker. I experienced this pain point my entire career, right? Whether it was auditing this at Deloitte or having non-audit clients at Deloitte, having to go through this, or even my days at GitHub. But I really felt it at Datadog when I had joined the company in 2015. And again, looking at some of our attendees here, I know that some of you are Datadog customers, right? A public company, high growth SaaS, and the observability and security space from a cloud infrastructure perspective. And I joined in 2015 really as the first finance hire, and moved from San Francisco to New York, and was basically given the mandate to get this company in a pre-IPO ready state. And I knew I was going to have some time based on the size of the company in 2015, because as you can see, Datadog went public in September of 2019. So I had some time, years, right? But your years can go pretty quickly. And one of the largest pain points that I had during my entire tenure at Datadog, whether it was running the FP&A teams, getting the company ready for the first financial statement audit, expanding internationally, whatever it was this topic exactly. We were in that bucket that I had mentioned earlier of a company that had to adhere to US GAAP and had a very large R&D organization that was building our product that, of course, we were selling to customers. And the US GAAP standard required us to capitalize our R&D costs. And in order to get through that first audit that we did of fiscal year 2015, we not only had to capitalize our costs, but we had to do it in a manner and a way in which there was an analysis that could support and be handed over to our financial statement auditors at Deloitte, the firm I used to work for, so that they could audit it and sign off on our financial statements and send us an audit report. I have to say that this project, when I add up my time, the accounting team members' time, the CTO co-founder's time, his VPs of engineering, his EMs, all the way down to developers and staff accountants on the accounting side, was thousands upon thousands of hours. I cannot stress that enough. And so from an opportunity cost perspective, had there been an Allstacks back in 2015, 2016, even today, I am very confident, and this is how I mentioned in my introduction why I decided to invest in the company. I'm very confident that those thousands of hours still would have needed some to be spent on how we capitalize it, right? We can't fully automate this thing. It's not going to do our US GAAP for us. It's not going to file our federal tax returns, right? That's not what we're saying. but we would have at least maybe been able to take those 2,000s of hours, thousands and thousands of hours, and maybe shrink it down to, I don't know, 100 and 200 hours. And so from an opportunity cost perspective, if you're able to do that and able to resource and put anybody else on either side, finance, accounting, or the R&D side, to go do something else, go build more product, go do bug fixes, or let's, do our accounting better, close the books quicker, or whatever it might be. That's just an absolute game changer. And so, we were in a little bit different situation in the sense that not only do we have to do this for US GAAP, but we also were doing it for US R&D credit purposes. Now, remember, this is before Section 174 that just became applicable for companies, but we were actually filing for credits on our US federal returns. And we were also with two French co-founders doing the same out in France under a different tax regulation. So we actually had 3 use cases that were using the same data, and that was our R&D teams. And we had spreadsheet upon spreadsheet upon spreadsheet of different tabs, different, bunch of different rows and everything. And so I just wanted to drive home that this is such a big pain point for not just the folks that sat in my seat at Datadog, but everybody else, the accounting managers, the controllers, the CTO co-founders, everybody that I mentioned. So this is what we're going to go into a little bit further here, as I pass it off to Parker to go into next about how Allstacks software can help with this.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Scott. I remember the first time you told that story, I was a little bit taken back. When you think of thousands of hours, that gets quite expensive, especially with the roles and the people involved in this process. So I think that's really, really telling, and appreciate you sharing that experience with us here. Wanted to focus real quickly on, picking up right where he was just talking about with the human hours and the reporting and the spreadsheets, and kind of this old way that I think of it. And that doesn't mean that it's not still being done today that way. But we talked about the time tracking could require process change. Historicals can be difficult to reconcile when you're manually reporting this beyond just the human error prone piece. And it can be a heavy burden, right? And so that can lead to a more difficult audit. And I think no one wants that. But automation is a really, really key piece of lightening that load and lightening that weight and making this more painless. Feel better about accuracy and defensibility and supportability of this data. Less or no manual overhead for the team. Pull these reports when you want them, right? Don't have it be a huge, big, grandiose effort every time you have to go through this. And of course, being able to be flexible and understand what's happening and what's being worked on and what is capitalizable versus not capitalizable. Using that data and retrieving is much better than having a human having to determine that, especially if it's someone that doesn't speak a common language or is around that shared source of truth that is engineering data. So I just want to drive home the fact that the automation piece is really key here for that data gathering and report generation. And it's already available in circumstances if you're using a Git-based SCM or a Jira or an ADO. And that's what we'll get into, the product piece of this and how we do it, right? A good lead in here to talk a little bit about, what does a good solution look like? And before I hand it off to Mark, want to just very quickly lay out a few points that we should be able to automate everything that we can in the upstream of the data gathering process. We should be able to leverage our existing engineering data whenever possible and make it as easy as possible to understand what is capitalizable versus non-capitalizable work. And so, I said it earlier, but I'm a true believer in saying it again. It's really about making something that's mission critical, business critical, simple and effective, as well as efficient. And that really does cater to the leaders and the humans involved in the process as well. So with that, I will let Mark take it away and show you how our product does this. And go ahead, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to double down on what Parker was saying, that really is the goal, is to take a process that has a lot of drudgery, maybe a huge amount of time invested, and get to the outcome that you need with a lighter weight, simple system. And the idea is engineering is capturing a lot of this information through the course of their work as they're tracking, whether it's through ADO or Jira, their development process. And what we want to do is create a document that can begin a conversation with an internal accounting team, your internal financial folks, that really leverages that data, that doesn't start from timesheets that may be error prone or may be resented, but instead uses a tool that is already part and parcel of the development process. This allows you to have more natural consistency. It doesn't have to be something you're thinking about all the time. It can be something that as you're sort of operating as an engineering team, you can continue to sort of keep the standard high and then leverage that at the end of the year or whenever you need to report this, whether it's monthly or on whatever interval that is. Additionally, we like to be able to use Allstacks to visualize this, right? Make this real for the engineers as they're doing it, make this real for financial folks if they're looking at the application, and really just sort of have that common ground. Yeah. And I'm not going to read you all these benefits here, but really, no one wants to be surprised when they're generating financial reports. They want to have an understanding well in advance of what things will look like. Yep. They don't want to spend a huge amount of time generating that information. And of course, the ultimate goal is you want a check mark for whatever financial treatment you're going through. And this will be a part of that story, and it can really sort of smooth a lot of those rough edges through this process, especially in terms of gathering that information or starting that gathering that information from engineering. And so it's this is the sort of drumbeat of the Allstacks solution here, is to really try to reduce that. And by saving time with the financial folks, by saving time interviewing, your engineers, you can reap those benefits. On the next slide, we'll see what's the thought process of someone who's using Allstacks and going through the process. What's an engineer thinking about when they're helping set this up? And then how does it ultimately get into real world dollars? And it's a relatively straightforward process. Again, different development shops do it differently, but there's generally a pretty standard way that people are noting that something is capitalizable. Engineers may have a label on work. There may be something that is common to all of them, and we will leverage that information to identify the big corpus, the big circus tent of data. From there, there's some stuff that you started, didn't work on a huge amount. You want to winnow that out, not have that be considered. And so you want to have that initial set of filtering. Yep. Once you have this corpus of work, you can say, hey, who worked on this stuff? Because that will certainly impact how much it costs the company. And so does your engineering workflow pass tickets off from engineer to engineer? We can account for that. Do tickets tend to be self-contained for engineers? That as well. Once you have this work associated with these developers, then we're going to lay on top of it salary information. And all of you folks probably know an employee costs more to their company than just their salary. There's other things that we will account for. And also, a lot of developers do not spend 100% of their time in the development world. And so we'll account for that as well. All of this is in service to generating this capitalization report. So if we look on the next slide, what we'll see is some fictitious work. We'll enter the world of fake data here for the sake of anonymity and for the sake of not showing anything that we don't want to. But this mocked up work shows you a good deal of completed things in red and green. The red things may be things that are completed, and I'm throwing air quotes there because oftentimes the conclusion of development work could be completion and actually shipping code. Sometimes things get canceled, and we want to be able to reflect that as well. Yep. And we will filter out that information from this because, again, generally does not represent actual investment in the same way that the things that turn green do. Also, you'll notice that off to the right is stuff that is in flight, work that has not yet come into a landing. And for now, that will be omitted from our calculation. As it completes, it is counted. And so we have a good sense that the things that we say are done will be done, were done, and will remain done. With that,
awesome.
Sorry. Yep.
Very, very well done. I love that. That visual is one of my favorites. Does a really, really good job, I think, of connecting those dots, Mark. And we can show it off and let's see it in action a little bit.
Let's do it. So what you're looking at here is the Allstacks application, and you're looking at the capitalization module. And so we have a couple different visualizations here to sort of give you a sense of the different ways this information can be cut. And so, as I mentioned, we're looking at delivered tickets, delivered work, and that work is often estimated. And this estimation, in many cases, is called story points. These story points offer you even more detail about the relative size of the work you've done. So it enriches your data stream if you have story points being assigned to tickets. And in this example, we'll say we do. But also, this fictitious team that I'm describing hands off tickets throughout their process. So if a ticket's assigned to Parker, we don't only want to give Parker credit, we would also like to give credit to the folks who were working on that ticket beforehand as well. And so towards that end, I'm going to say, let's do a story point estimation method, and let's split the credit among current and historic assignees equally. And so I come in here, I can get a sense of overall what this might look like broken out by different, and these are sort of initiatives or feature sets. We'll call them epics in Jira, but in the real world, they're things that you're trying to deliver at sort of a larger scale. And we can generate a report based off of this. I'll just toss a 2001 example in here. And in this world, the team has actually created a field called Allstacks capitalizable. And it's a Boolean. If it's yes, then yes, it is capitalizable. If it says no or is empty, then we tend to think it's not. And the sort of place that we're looking, the way that we're grouping work has us looking at the epic level. And again, depending on your organization, you may have different places that you're trying to look at this. We've also seen initiative and feature being a common set as well. And so the general shape of the data is reflected here or in these selections. I do want to say that things that say won't, it's whether it's won't do or won't complete. We have a couple different statuses that imply that the work will not be done. We want to omit that. That stuff wasn't part of the story. And so I'll generate my report. I have a swap ready for us so we don't have to wait 15 minutes. But if you're living in the real world, you'll receive an email that will look very much like this. And what this is, the work metadata tab that we're looking at right now, is a list of all of those epics, their features or initiatives, the types of things that your engineering team is delivering. We're going to estimate them by story point, and it's calling out what its belief is about the capitalizability of this data. And this is your moment to check this. So I've noticed row 3 has reduced performance bottlenecks, bug smash. It's an epic. It was labeled capitalizable. However, I think it's probably not the best suited thing for that. So this is part of that conversation about, are we sure that this data is, exactly what we want? We'll double check it here. By and large, this is the shape of the work that you have cataloged correctly, and we're just double checking it here. At this point, we have a good sense of the work involved. We have these epics. We understand that there's smaller tickets contained within those, and that's what's going to represent a lot of the work. And we can actually come in and look at our contributors. And so you'll see, and again, all fake data, so don't worry, Bailey's not having her salary announced to the world, but we have a base salary. On top of that, we have the burden rate, the additional cost to the company beyond the salary of that person. And we're also recognizing that some people are managers, some people are ICs. And so essentially, we have an overhead rate. And let's say your overhead rate is 50% because Bailey spends a bunch of her time coaching other engineers. Or Charlotte is more of an IC and only losing 30% of their time, which is generally a standard tax of just you're attending engineering type meetings and things of this nature. We're able to take this information and pair that with this capitalizable ratio and generate what would be capitalizable compensation. You can see, and again, roughed out here, these values by individual, and we can look at this by month as well and take a look and see, okay, this is actually the distribution throughout the year. Looking at it by year is one of the ways that's looking at this information by developer is one of the ways that's very valuable, but it's not the only one. The second one is from the perspective of each initiative, each bucket of things, or how much they cost, right? How much was invested? And so this is another cut of that data. And you can see, again, we have the totals here, and then we have it broken out by month. And again, this document is really meant to frame the conversation with internal financial teams so that you have an interface between engineering and the finance folks that's really common ground and will be consistent month over month, year over year, and can really sort of calm the seas of this process. That's the overall picture. I'll pass it back to you all and happy to take questions on any details you have questions about.
Awesome. Love that. Very well done, Mark. thank you for showing it off live. Doing live demos is never easy. And so really, really nice job there. And I think it goes to show just how much time, right, you can save instead of doing that manually on your own if you're, for example, a senior engineering leader. And with that, we're right on track as far as timing. Had about 30 minutes slotted for content, and then time for Q&A today. And you'll notice that there's a link here where if you'd like to see this and try software capitalization with your own data, a shameless plug that we just announced that we are generally available with our software capitalization product as of Tuesday of this week. So we're really excited about that. And one of the reasons that we came to share this product and the news with everybody today. And so would really like to see anyone that wants to see this with their own data and try it out would be happy to help you and answer any questions. So a little shameless plug there from the product side of the house, but we can get right into Q&A here. So let's see what questions we may have. And if we want to pop Scott and Mark back up, we will look at some of these questions here together. So I've got one here from Abraham, and it says, can you filter data to exclude certain things like work that was never done or completed?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we filter on is the status of work. So oftentimes in Jira, the resolved state of a ticket can vary. And the common resolution states of this work are done, as you might expect, but there's also often canceled. There's also often won't do. And if you're able to reference those, we absolutely can remove that from the ratio and represent only the work that you truly shipped.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, Abraham, is, like I had mentioned, this software is just not going to be an end-to-end full automation of what you need it for. What Allstacks is going to do is going to get you that starting point of data, of developer time, developer work that has been done off of actual systems and aggregated and presented to you. What you'll need to do, at least what I would need to do back in my seat in my prior roles, is I would then need to sit down with folks and summarize that data and say, hey, actually, maybe this is a bug fix and that's not capitalizable under ASC 350. And so I'm going to remove this from the thing. Or, hey, maybe like your question said, this is something that is capitalizable, but it hasn't launched yet. So I need to make sure that I start capitalizing it, but I then don't start amortizing it because it isn't done yet and it hasn't launched into GA. So just trying to drive home the fact that it's still going to require human intervention and human review of it. What this is avoiding is timesheets of the CTO asking the VP of engineering to summarize in many Excel spreadsheets what each person is working on and how long and when. So just wanted to answer that part of your question. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you. I think that was a great addition. And it looks like we have a couple more come in. And please, if you have questions, please do ask in the chat. We are looking and monitoring. There's one. Can you download? This is a good one. Can you download and share out metrics used to generate the R&D report? I guess they saw some of those metrics that you were, overviewing in the product itself, Mark.
So that's what the email that will be delivered to my email address contains. It is essentially running off of our velocity, the completed work metric that we have, and it's taking that and packaging it in a way that's especially consumable to a financial person, to someone who's trying to think about this salary information and how to pair them together. So it's a slightly different cut of the data, but the idea is that it's tailored to this use case specifically.
Gotcha. Makes sense. And so you can always then look at the metric itself in the app and, look at that data as well, in parallel to having the report itself. Okay.
Absolutely. What we see oftentimes is people make dashboards in Allstacks, and those dashboards have a bunch of different things that, engineering leaders are tracking. And this is often one of them, just front and center right there. So you understand the ratio. So sort of keep your hand on the pulse, and then you can export this information when you want to sort of share it with a larger group.
Sure. Awesome. And it looks like we have one more for now. And, we've talked about this a little bit, but I think it's a good one to hammer home, and probably a good one for you, Scott. And it's, will the Section 174 capitalization work and the US GAAP reported capitalization work often differ, or will it differ significantly?
Yes, I think That's the short answer to your question. And I will expand upon that by saying that's what's so frustrating about this is you're, again, using the same data. There's one R&D company or one department at each company, right? There's not like a bunch of different sets of data and all this stuff of what's being worked on from an R&D perspective. However, because the US GAAP side is a completely different compliance standard than the Internal Revenue Code, which is what is Section 174 is based off of and is in, you're going to get two different answers. And they're also going to go in two different places because, again, the US GAAP side is going to go on your balance sheet. And what you're doing for Section 174 is going to go on your returns and be estimated in your quarterly tax payments. So same data, but again, two very different use cases. And that was the slide that we had presented, earlier of just those two columns summarizing these two different use cases.
Sure. Awesome. I think that was very clear. Thank you. And then let's see. It looks like we got one more that came in from Connor. Does Allstacks allow for amortization of capitalized software over time or interface directly with NetSuite? And so kind of a two-parter. But I don't know, Mark, if you want to pop in. I know I could say right now NetSuite is not something that we integrate with directly, but we are actively having conversations around what kind of that future looks like.
Yeah, and Connor, great to see you. It's been almost a couple decades. I hope you're doing well. What you're basically going to do this with this spreadsheet and whatnot after you've determined the amount to capitalize is, to Parker's point, there's no integration, there's no API calls between NetSuite and what we're building here. So it's just going to be a quick journal entry that you do, and that is based off of the byproduct that Allstacks is producing for you. And that's what will go into NetSuite.
Cool. Thank you, Scott. And then this is a good one. Another one from Corey says, maybe I missed this, but for an individual contributor that works on, several tickets and projects during a quarter, could be both capitalizable and non. How does your software split their time between those projects? I know that, we've got that full credit and split credit metric, Mark, so probably a good one to talk about there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that we're working right now is a ticket that is 6 points assigned to 3 people with split credit among current and historic assignees is going to make an even split of this. Now, although it's not always true that everyone spends exactly the same amount of time, what we find is that work functions generally have the same proportion of effort per ticket. And so when we bring this into a ratio and say a QA person worked on 17 tickets in capitalizable form and 38 tickets overall, that split actually comes out in the wash. And we do actually see sort of a normalizing effect from this ratio. So we split it evenly, and it has been pretty predictive anyways for that. Thanks.
Awesome. And I think it looks like we have no more questions coming in. So if you do have any last minute, please do feel free to pop them in. You did get a thank you back from Connor there, Scott. But if not, this will be where we can wrap up. And it looks like we're right about on time here today. And we'll give you all back 3 or 4 minutes. But I want to say thank you to Scott. Thank you to Mark. It's been wonderful working with y'all on this, and really appreciate the collaboration here. I think this is a wonderful product, and there's a problem to solve, and really, really excited to see this come to life into the market. And then thank you everyone for joining today, wherever you may have joined from. Check out our website. We're going to be shipping a white paper on this very soon as well. So keep your eyes out for that. And give us a shout if you have any questions after the webinar. We'd be happy to engage further. But thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.